at a combined speed of nearly 200 kilometers per hour. Passengers are rocked by one collision after another as 70 freight cars pile into the wreckage.
Like an incoming wave, grain cars, long pipes 3 foot in diameter, 30 feet in length, you name it. And these were flying through the air like toys.
Thrown from the tracks by the force of the collision, one freight car flies through the air, smashing to a stop on the Via train.
The whole world seemed to explode.
It was like a mini atom bomb. It was a big mushroom of black smoke.
Then everything was dark. They could no longer breathe because everything was filled with smoke. Oh, I'm going to die. And the third thing that happened was I just resigned myself to that.
I've been working about 37 years, and on the railroad, and I never seen anything so bad.
The wave of metal, grain cars, stopped just where the dome car was. If it had gone another 30 feet, it would have covered us as well.
In the same car, one deck below, Martin Pedersen struggles to escape. But he can barely see what's happening in front of him. The window beside him shattered during impact, filling his eyes with broken glass. Almost 2 kilometers behind the engine, the caboose of train 413 finally lurches to a stop. Conductor Wayne Smith sees a ball of fire glowing in the distance, but he has no idea how bad the situation is.
Front end 413. I think we're in the bush or we're derailed. There is a big explosion up here, and we have chemicals on the train, so stay away from it. Stay away from the dangerous goods.
But all Smith gets in reply is an ominous silence. Passengers continue to struggle to escape the mangled wreck of their train as the smoke thickens.
I was trained well in the Royal Marines to survive and to act spontaneously. There was a window at the back of the dome car, and it was all cracked, and I just jumped up on the seat, smashed my head through the glass roof, and shouted, "Come on, let's get out."
Cuttle and others jump from the car.
And I looked back, and all of a sudden it ignited. Woof!
Down below in the lounge car, Martin Pedersen also manages to escape. But others aren't so lucky. Many are still trapped in the burning cars, including passenger Jamie Haight.
The roof of the coach had been crunched down. I mean, I'd lost my glasses. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. And here it was the porter that had been behind the snack bar, had opened up this exit way, and he had vamoosed out through it, and I took off out behind it too.
Snap out of it.
He was in shock.
Hey, snap out of it.
Hey, buddy, pull it together here. You know, there's people in here, and we got to do something about it, but...
Half blind without his glasses, Haight goes back inside, trying to help others out of the wreck.
413 here, dispatcher.
Back in the caboose, Smith is talking to the freight train's dispatcher, some 285 kilometers away in Edmonton.
Smoke and everything in the air.
We're gonna get a doctor out here. And some ambulance.
Herb Timpey, the assistant conductor on the passenger train, can hear the conversation on his radio and breaks in.
Passenger coaches all over the ditch.
And get an ambulance.
And there's a whole bunch of cars on fire. You get that, dispatcher?
We
I'm gonna walk up there and see if I can be of any assistance.
What was the signal at Dalehurst when your head-in called it?
Pardon me?
What was that signal on that signal at Dalehurst?
Well, I was calling him for the signal at Dalehurst quite a few times, but I kept calling him and there was no answer.
Well, it should have been red on the panel.
Well, he must have ran it then, dispatcher, because I could not get a hold of him. I tried and I tried.
Okay, all right.
Back at the head of the passenger train, Jamie Haight tries to save who he can.
Are you okay? I'm gonna help you.
Haight can hear the screams of men and women trapped in the flames.
And I can hear the women that I had dinner with the night before screaming, you know, to save her baby.
Haight was not able to save the mother and her child. They're out of reach under debris.
That was difficult.
People who were trapped and couldn't get out, screaming like you've never heard. One guy knew that his wife was trapped and he went back in and died with her. Another woman in the carriage under where we were had most of her leg cut off.
James Haight courageously decides to go back inside. The fire is a scorching 660 degrees, but Haight tries to save one more life.
But there was a chap right in front of me there, and it was the chap I had dinner with the night before. And all of a sudden the flames came and consumed him. He just sat up and rubbed his head, and because there's nothing more we could do for him. And anybody in front of me in that coach was dead. For whatever the reasons, it wasn't my time to go then, for whatever the reasons.
Wayne Smith is devastated. He can't reach his two friends at the front of the freight train, and he can't understand what happened to cause such an enormous disaster. In Western Canada, a freight train has smashed head-on into a passenger train carrying more than 100 people. In the minutes after the collision, survivors are dragging themselves from the burning wreckage, while others are still trapped inside.
One of the girls that had been in the car in the morning, and I looked at her and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to tell you,
He had no choice but to tell her what happened to her friend in the train.
your friend was in the car here."
She died, trapped in the burning debris.
I felt like the worst person in the world, because I had to tell her. If I could have taken back that 1 second in time to not tell her, you know.
Royal Canadian Mounted Police Constable Mark Linnell is one of the first to arrive on the scene.
I was told there was a train derailment, not a train crash. I mean, there's a double whammy.
The RCMP officer came. He could hardly speak. His mouth dropped open and he said, "I can't believe what I'm witnessing."
It's a horrifying scene. Pictures taken shortly after the crash show utter devastation.
I mean, I was just flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe it. And instant. That's quite the thing to see.
The collision is 18 kilometers from the town of Hinton. It takes emergency crews some 45 minutes to get there.
I was in the Marines in England for 14 years, and I'd seen a lot of disasters, man-made disasters, terrorist bombs. And I thought I'd seen it all. There was a lot of blunt force trauma, of course, flying glass, burns. And then I saw what appeared to be two bodies in the restaurant car hugging each other. So we found out later that was a man and wife. And this was one heck of a shock.
As Linnell is escorting survivors away from the site, he sees a lone man with a radio coming down the track.
How's the front end doing?
What's your name?
Smith is about to learn that his colleagues aboard his train are dead.
Like, what happened? Like, did they make contact with the...
We're still under investigation, and there's not a lot I can tell you right now.
Okay, so they still might be... I mean...
I'm really sorry.
He'd be distraught and shaken, and his train is wrecked, and all these people dead.
The Hinton train disaster is the worst railway accident to strike Canada in 35 years. More than $30 million in property are destroyed. 23 people are dead, and 71 others are severely injured. Wayne Smith is the only surviving crew member of the CN train. The only man who may be able to explain how an 11 million kilo freighter plowed headfirst into an oncoming passenger train. What he knows could be critical to unraveling the cause of the disaster. 2 days after the collision, the Alberta government establishes an official commission of inquiry. And the Honourable Mr. Justice René P. Foisy leads the investigation. Judge Foisy is a justice of the Alberta Court of Appeal.
It was reasonably simple. I mean, what caused the accident? But it turned out to be a lot more complicated than that, because there were no easy answers as to what caused the accident.
Freight and passenger trains routinely use the same tracks without incident. What was different this time? Over the next 11 months, Foisy calls on 150 witnesses and specialists to help him find out.
I think what has most surprised me is the complex procedures, the equipment, the overall complexity that we have to look at in running a railroad, and what goes on in running a railroad.
While Conductor Smith recovers from the accident, Foisy gets to work. He begins by studying the signals that should have told the freight train to stop. If they weren't working, the crew on 413 may not have thought they needed to slow down.
CN did a very in-depth test on the signal system, and it was determined that it was performing properly. We went further. We hired our own independent experts to test the system.
The switches which operate the signal lights were frozen in position after the accident. Electrical engineer Eugene Couch was hired to read them. Perhaps a mechanical fault in the system had turned them green, telling the freight train to speed through.
A fault does not give a positive green light to any situation. So if there was a fault in any controls part of the system, it would have forced everything to go to red, which meant the passenger train would have stopped and would have forced the freight train to stop. Basically, our conclusion, we felt that the system was sound and was safe.
Foisy believes the lights were red, but the freight train ignored them. Perhaps another mechanical fault was behind the crash.
Well, I was calling him for the signal at Dalehurst Court.
In his statement after the crash, conductor Wayne Smith told Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that something was wrong with his radio that morning.
Because I could not get a hold of him. I tried and I tried.
Maybe the front of the train was having mechanical problems, but they weren't able to get in contact with Smith. Joseph Hebert examines the portable radios the crew used.
The first test was with the radio that was on the train that was in the accident at Hinton. The radio performed to specification.
But even if the radios themselves were working, there could be another problem. Many see...
I've been working about 37 years, and on the railroad, and I never seen anything so bad.
The wave of metal, grain cars, stopped just where the dome car was. If it had gone another 30 feet, it would have covered us as well.
Everything was dark. They could no longer breathe because everything was filled with smoke. Oh, I'm going to die. And the third thing that happened was I just resigned myself to that.
At a combined speed of nearly 200 kilometers per hour. Passengers are rocked by one collision after another as 70 freight cars pile into the wreckage.
Like an incoming wave, grain cars, long pipes 3 foot in diameter, 30 feet in length, you name it. And these were flying through the air like toys.
Thrown from the tracks by the force of the collision, one freight car flies through the air, smashing to a stop on the Via train.
The whole world seemed to explode.
It was like a mini atom bomb. It was a big mushroom of black smoke.
Then,
in the same car, one deck below, Martin Pedersen struggles to escape. But he can barely see what's happening in front of him. The window beside him shattered during impact, filling his eyes with broken glass. Almost 2 kilometers behind the engine, the caboose of train 413 finally lurches to a stop.